Okay, welcome back to Ner Avram and Shari Chesed Yerushalayim for Shir on Parshas Beshalach. Now, Parshas Beshalach, sometimes I find all sorts of small details in Parshas Beshalach. Aside from Kriyas Yam Suf, that's the centerpiece, right? You have the Mon, you have the first battle with Amalek going on, etc. But today we're going to look at an aspect of Kriyas Yam Suf. We're just saying we need some agricultural advice to hear how good the cold weather is for us. Must be good for the plants. So, first of all, the question with Kriyas Yam Suf, it comes kind of a childish question I always had is, why did it happen? In other words, it seems almost like one of these climax things in some kind of movie, Havdil, that it's all over. The villain was destroyed, and then the music plays, and you see the villain's hands climbing up, and then there's another 20 more minutes until it's finished. So here we had Makas Bechoros. Paro said, go. Am Yisrael went, Biyad Rama, we went, but suddenly Mitzrayim's going after them. And then we have an entire new set of Nisim, right, which Chazal say there were more Nisim on the Yam than there were in Mitzrayim. And we also see the Shvi Shel Pesach gets its own particular status as a Yom Tov, right? That has to be there. So there was something very special in the Gilui, as well as in the fact that we say Oz Yoshir every day. There are very special things we're supposed to learn from Kriyas Yam Suf, and we're going to try to take a look at a couple of them. One is that Kriyas Yam Suf is viewed as a tremendous expression of love, a tremendous expression of ahava. Even though they say it was a time of din, it was a time of judgment, because there was the famous kitrug that the Midrashim bring down, the prosecution, that the Malachim, or Yam Suf itself, different versions, said, why should the sea split for these and not for those? Halolu of de Avodah Zarah, v'halolu. Right, these ones serve Avodas, these ones serve Avodah Zarah. And it goes on even more in the Medrash. One of the more interesting ones is it says, Halolu megadle bloris, v'halolu. Now the bloris, right, was this very kind of scary type of haircut. Maybe it was something like what you call a mohawk. It was just, if people learn the Daf Yomi today, it mentions David HaMelech had this force of 400 men who were megadle bloris. Rashi says, right, this was to frighten the enemies, right, when they would see these guys. So unlike my grandchildren's coloring books where they came out with streimlich and payas and beards, it could be that they looked very different than that when they were going out. So, and therefore, first of all, is a tremendous gilui of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for Am Yisrael, that despite that kitrug, and it's interesting, that means to say that even Am Yisrael, having gone through being in Mitzrayim and the 10 Makos, and seeing it and coming out, they still had work to do. They were still tied into things. It was still difficult for them. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed that choice of Am Yisrael. Hello, welcome. We have another chair? Yeah, take anything off the chairs you need. So there's a wonderful gilui, something amazing that I heard first. It was brought from Rabbi Zion Twersky from Milwaukee, was quoting a sefer called Orach L'Chaim. The Orach L'Chaim was a Talmud of the Maggid of Mezrich. And he just has an amazing thing. I've said it before, but it'll set the scene for what we're learning today. He says, what is the big chiddush that we find where it says, Vayar Yisrael Mitzrayim Mesal Svas Hayam, right? It says, sorry, let's just get the exact order of the words. Right? It says, Vayar Yisrael, right, es Mitzrayim Mesal Svas Hayam. Am Yisrael saw the Mitzrayim dead on the shore of the sea. And then it says, Vayar Yisrael Sayor Gdola Asher Asa Hashem b'Mitzrayim. And then it says that Am Yisrael saw the great hand, meaning the great might that Hashem did in Mitzrayim. Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe Avdo. Right? That seems out of order. In other words, the stuff in Mitzrayim happened before. Here it's talking about what happened with Vayar Yisrael Mitzrayim Mesal Svas Hayam. So this was a very special miracle. He explains in the following way. Chazal tell us that Am Yisrael were afraid that perhaps the Mitzrayim weren't killed. Perhaps the Mitzrayim came up on some other side of the shore and they're going to come and get us. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu made this miracle that the Yam supernaturally spat out all the dead Egyptians. In fact, one version of the Medrash says every Jew was able to see his own oppressor and to say, that one, that Eichmann is dead. And now, so there, they said the following. The Jews may have had in their heart the whole time that Hashem is saving us. He's doing these makas against the Mitzrayim, but it's not because he loves us. And in fact, they felt very unlovable. They knew that they weren't very good Jews. They knew that they were in Memteh Shari Tuma. They knew that they had assimilated so much from Egypt into them. Why is Hashem saving us? Because he promised our forefathers that he was going to do it. And we happen to be the children. We ain't much of children, but he's got to do it. He's contractually obligated to take us out of Mitzrayim. Right? He told Avraham Avinu, they're going to come out. So they felt he's not doing this because he loves us. He's doing it because he has to. And in fact, he used the Lashon, he says, he probably hates us. Right? But he's stuck. And this they were able to carry with them throughout the punishment of the Mitzrayim, etc. But here, this miracle of having the Egyptians come out on the sea so that they wouldn't have this fear that perhaps they're still alive and coming after them, that was an expression of love. That didn't have to be done for any fulfillment of the promise to Avraham Avinu. That was showing, I care for you, and I want you to feel comforted. And then they were able to look back at Mitzrayim and say, you know what? Now I see Gedolei Hachasidus. Now I look back and I see that was also out of love. It wasn't that he had to. And then, right, everyone was able to do it was this huge turnaround. Now, again, I mentioned it seems to us strange, this idea, you know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu just did these supernatural things, and when you look in the Midrashim, the Mitzrayim were going up and down and getting smashed, and the horses and the wagons and everything conceivable happening. It seems to us kind of, you know, unrealistic to think maybe they're okay and they're going to come after us. But the Rav in our shul, it said that he had an aunt who was a Holocaust survivor, and she made it to America and she made her life. And then the announcement came, I forget which year it was, that the Israelis had captured Eichmann and brought him to Israel for the Eichmann trial. He said his aunt had like a breakdown. Like she took her months to recover. Why? He remembers thinking he's a kid. What are you afraid of? He's a prisoner in Israel. You're in America. The very fact that he was still there sent her into this world of trauma and fear that it took her a long time to get out. So therefore, we shouldn't be mezalzel in Jews that are saying, you know, maybe they came out the other side. HaKadosh Baruch Hu understood. He wanted to comfort even a pain that wasn't logical, even something that maybe wasn't there. Okay? Now, there are other ways to look at it as well. You can look at it as people not necessarily who are suffering from fear and trauma from what they're doing, but people who are kvetchers, right? In other words, people who, yeah, it was a great miracle, yeah, we came through the sea, yeah, but you know, maybe they're still alive, right? There's always someone who likes to put a little suffix into something, who likes to pop the balloon. Yeah, it was a good miracle, but I don't see the evidence that the Mitzrayim are finished. You know, it was very noisy and tumultuous there with the water. I don't know what happened to them particularly. So these are people, right, that always did. There's a medrash, I wasn't able to track it down today. I'd found it once, it was fascinating. It says, the two Jews are walking through Yam Suf, and one says to the other, look down, what do you see? He says, what? He says, mud. Mud here, mud there. What's the big difference? Right? If we worked in mud in Mitzrayim, we're going through the mud. Right? There's a picture of there's a person that could be going through such a miracle, but he always finds what to kvetch about. Now, this is, in certain ways, part of our very nature. Okay, this was HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I was here in the Medrash that was brought in Va'era, right? It says that Vayitzavim, he spoke to Moshe and Aaron, Vayitzavim el b'nei Yisrael. Amar lem HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe and Aaron, Bonai sarvonim heim. My children are stubborn. They're misarev, they refuse. Ragzonim heim, they are temperamental, they're grouchy. Tarchonim heim, that means they're nudniks. Almanas kein tiyu makablim aleichem. On Almanas kein, on this condition, are you becoming their leaders to accept them? To the extent you makalim eschem, that they will curse you, you masaklin eschem ba'avonim, that they will throw stones at you. That is the world of Jewish leadership. That is the world of the Jewish people. So here, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did something for such people as well shows a tremendous sense of love and care, that everybody should be able to be on the same page, because Kriyas Yam Suf was just the beginning, and they had to go on now to Matan Torah. And everyone had to be brought up to that level. So if it took another miracle for them, it would be done. And that's also an educational lesson for Am Yisrael, that you might be tempted to leave back either that guy with phobias, who Nebuch, whatever he went through in Mitzrayim, he's not so well, but what can we do for him, right? You have to do for him. There's a beautiful story at the end of the whole saga of the Mir Yeshiva in Shanghai. So finally, the war was over to that extent, and the government of America, Canada, a couple other countries opened up more consular services in Shanghai to enable people to apply for visas to immigrate. And this was something they very much wanted. In fact, Rav Feivel Mendelovich tried recommending to them that they should go to South America, because he said many Jews had already emigrated to South America and there was no significant yeshiva there at the time. But in the book that I read, it said that they'd gone through so much, they weren't ready for another adventure yet. They wanted to go someplace with established Jewish communities, more girls that they could possibly marry, things like that. But the U.S. authorities were kind of strict on people being sick in certain ways. They didn't want them. My grandmother was delayed in Ellis Island because she had some eye infection or something till they decided to let her through. And there was one fellow who'd had a bit of a nervous breakdown toward the end of the war there. So some of the Talmidim approached Reb Chaim Shmulevitz almost as a given, say, Rebbe, we just want you to know you don't have to worry about Moshe, whatever his name is, because we spoke to people here from the local community and they're going to take care of him. Reb Chaim said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If he doesn't go, we don't go. And they said, but Rebbe, he can't. He says, if he doesn't go, we don't go. So Reb Chaim said he would take care of it. He tried coaching him beforehand, because you would have an interview, right, where they would have to ask you some questions. And he tried preparing him for the interview, and he came, and he did okay in this interview. But toward the end, he kind of lost it, and he got up and he started babbling in Yiddish. And the man said, what is that? He says, he's been dreaming all his life of moving to America. He's just so excited. That's what's happening. And then came the time for, you had to take an oath, right? So they came in, and the guy was already not in a state that he could, do whatever had to be done. But there was a big crowd, so meanwhile they said, okay, we can't do this one by one. Everybody raise your hand. Reb Chaim picked up the guy's hand, and it was all done. And Baruch Hashem, he had ever four afterwards. Okay, but this idea, there's no Jew will be left behind, is not just for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's for us. Okay, and that's brings us to the Shivcha. Okay, this brings us to this maidservant, this mysterious maidservant. Rasa Shivcha al Hayom, Mashaloro Yechezkel ben Buzi. Right, it says in the Medrash, Shivcha saw at Kriyas Yam Suf that which Yechezkel ben Buzi, the Novi, Yechezkel didn't see. Right, another gear says Yechezkel and Yeshaya. So everyone likes to quote. I didn't find it inside in what they bring from the Kotzker, but it's always quoted from the Kotzker. It says, you got to realize, he says, she saw what Yechezkel, more than Yechezkel, but she still remained the Shivcha. Right? Which is an important message, because we shouldn't fool ourselves in thinking that if Hashem would just show me one miracle, I would be such a tzaddik. All the Rishonim in Tanakh saw miracles. Right? It doesn't do it. Right? And there are countless stories where a person sees something supernatural and does something a moment, but right, it leaves you afterwards. It doesn't do it. It has to be that a person is really building things with the work, and then the idea, if you see some type of nace that can reinforce, that can help, Right? This is a story, L'Shvach. It's a praiseworthy story. I thought this was fascinating. They've been putting out videos from the Shiva of the Rebbetzin of the Pnei Menachem. Okay, the previous Ger Rebbe, Pinchas Menachem Alter, so last year his Rebbetzin passed away. So as the children were sitting there, so they were just filming constantly, and there were so many interesting conversations. First of all, it's just educational shimush to see that it's certainly done with, COVID Rosh, with seriousness and respect, but it also is an idea. You see them talking and celebrating things about their mother, and people shared with them, and they shared with them, and they were able to smile and to do. It's a very interesting that it's not just supposed to be this horribly glum experience. Again, Baruch Hashem, she was a woman who lived a long life and did much. But they told the story that once a man came to their father, right, to her husband, the Pnei Menachem, and he was telling the Rebbe how he has 6 children and he has no parnasa, right? And the Rebbe was saying, he says, 9 nefashos and no parnasa? So the guy quickly says, Rebbe, 8 nefashos. He said, 9 nefashos and no parnasa? Right? And it kind of went on like that for a while. So he came home, and his wife said, "No, what the Rebbe say?" He said, "The Rebbe says 9 nefashos and no parnasa." Anyway, so she went and she did a test, and indeed, she was expecting another one. So he said they went to tell their mother, right? They went to tell their mother, "You know what happened? The Father's Day, this man came. He said 9 nefashos." She said, "Okay, fine. Was he a geholfen or not? Did he get help or not, right? You get a bracha, do he have parnasa? Doesn't he have parnasa? That's what's concerning me. It's great that he could do that, right? But you have to keep your eye on the ikar here, right? What's with it? So that's the famous statement they bring from the Kotzker, and it does have that message. But, right, there are other ways of looking at it. The Rizhner Rebbe said, Ra'asa Shivcha al Hayom, that Shivcha saw by the sea, Mashelo Ra'a Yechezkel ben Buzi, what Yechezkel didn't see. So the question is, what is it that Yechezkel didn't see? Oh, exactly. In other words, Yechezkel knew that when he had a gilui from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, right, even Maisa Merkava, he's not seeing everything. There's so much more that he doesn't see. And so it is for everyone who progresses in Yiddishkeit and Chachma and understanding. The more you see, the more you realize that you don't see. Right? It's like going down this corridor where every door you open, there's another corridor with more doors. That's why our greatest Chachamim are called Talmidei Chachamim. Constantly learning, constantly doing. So the Shivcha also, right, as unsophisticated as she may have been, she also knew, right, that as impressive as this is, Kodesh Baruch Hu is even more than that, more than I can imagine. That's just a nice way of seeing it. But in terms of the theme here is the following. The Talmud Rebbe asked, he said, who was the Shivcha? Right? First of all, there's no reference to the idea in a pasuk. Where in the world do you see in a pasuk anything that would send the Medrash to this idea of the Shivcha? Right? It doesn't seem to be anything there. Am Yisrael, is it referring to all the women in Am Yisrael? No, they were all freed. They were freed, okay? If it was going to be the Avodim and Shvachos that they were in Mitzrayim, it would have been the men, the ladies, everybody. So he says, and it's not the Erev Rav. It's not the Erev Rav. And in fact, it says, he brought the Sfas Emes who says that the Erev Rav Davka didn't sing Oz Yoshir. So a Shivcha would be, as we know it, what's called a Shivcha Kananis, right? Which doesn't have to come from Canaan. Echshu, somehow, along with all the different gold and silver and stuff that Am Yisrael came out with, a few of them may have purchased or been given as a matana, some maidservant from Sri Lanka or something who was there in Egypt, and she came out also. Okay, but a Shivcha Kananis becomes part of Am Yisrael. Right? When she's there, she has a chiyuv in mitzvahs. If her family that owns her is a kohen, she can eat truma. She becomes part of this. So she's in a tricky position. She's very distant and very foreign. She's not 100%, so to speak, part of Am Yisrael, but she does have chiyuvim al pi Torah. So he said like this. He said it must be that, he didn't quite say like this, if there was a Shivcha Knanis, she would have had to be able to see what everyone else saw. Because the way of Am Yisrael, the idea here, is this was a preparation. This was the big step now before Matan Torah, where everyone was going to be Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. And everyone had to be, and he quotes the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah, it says that if one Jew had not said Nase B'Nishma, had not been there at Matan Torah, no matter who or what he was, that means even Dasan and Aviram, they were there, and they didn't participate. They decided they were going to sleep in and hear about it afterwards. Torah wouldn't have been given. So the idea was that it's lacking for us, if we're having an experience of this Gilui of HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Yam Suf, it isn't the way it's supposed to be unless even the Shivcha is able to experience it at the highest level. And that's something HaKadosh Baruch Hu did there educationally for us, right? To make sure, to realize, don't think, okay, listen, the people who get it, get it. The ones who don't get it, don't get it. Sorry, no. If they don't get it, you don't get it. If it's not there, so then it's not for everyone. And this is why it had to be, right, that this Shivcha would be able to see and experience that which there is, right? He says everyone had to come down from their high horse. Everyone had to ensure that everyone who's there is going to be able to have that experience and to come. So this is something which is very important for everyone, right, who's been given the opportunity by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to somehow progress, to somehow experience something, to somehow have something. You're not just supposed to say, Shalom alai nafshi, right, I'm good. The more you have almost, the more you feel the lack that other people have. And you're supposed to at least be caring for them and thinking for them. That's part of the educational aspect. As HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed his love for Am Yisrael, right, at that point, so too, he's teaching Am Yisrael, you have to show love for each other in that way. And don't be snobs, and don't be picky, and don't think people don't count. There's a story I like very much. So often I forget the Rebbe in the story. There was a man who he started giving tzedakah, right? He was not so wealthy, but he was being careful to give the tzedakah he had. And he gave tzedakah, and he wasn't very fussy who he gave to, this poor person, that poor person, this tzedakah fund. And he started making more money, and he's giving out. And suddenly he thinks to himself, listen, now I've become like a businessman. And I understand the idea of, there are better investments and worse investments. There are grade A stocks, and there are grade B stocks. So why don't I do my due diligence and really give to the best of the best? Right? So he started seeking out Talmidei Chachamim, Tzaddikim, the people who he felt most deserved tzedakah in Hashem's world. And he gave to them. But then his business started going down and down. So he came, I forget, it might have been Rebbe Zosha, I can't remember. And he said, Rebbe, what's happening? I'm giving tzedakah, I've set it up, I'm doing, and everything's going down. He says, I'll tell you what's happening. He says, before Hashem looked at you, and you were giving money even to people who don't deserve. Now, I'm opening parentheses. There's been a lot of talk recently. There are terrible scams that go on, and there are people that aren't honest. You do have a responsibility when you have tzedakah money, especially if it's not just a shekel, but it's a significant sum. You're a custodian of that money, right, that it go to places that are legitimate. That's for sure. But this idea of checking into each person, finding the most worthy, the best, and that's who I want to give to. He says, so you know what? You gave to people who didn't deserve. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at you. You don't deserve much either, and he gave to you. Now you're saying, I only want to give to people that really, really deserve it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at you. You don't deserve that much, and therefore you don't get it either. Right? So this is, yeah. So that's the idea. A person can't overlook and leave back, right? People. If they feel that they are not on the same level, or if they feel that they're not deserving, the Geula of Am Yisrael has to be a Geula of Am Yisrael, right? It has to be something that a person wants and cares. And so too we find a mysterious Shivcha appearing again in Parshas Chukas in our next battle with Amalek. Right? Because it said there, Vayish bimenu shevi. It says that Amalek took captives from Am Yisrael. Very relevant topic. Chazal say, who was that captive? One shivcha. One shivcha was taken. And Am Yisrael went to war right? And that was a full-out war against Amalek for that one shivcha, right? Which is also to show this image of the shivcha represents someone, and maybe she wasn't even originally a part of you. And she isn't like a Ger Tzedek who came voluntarily and decided to go through and to join. And like the Rambam says, there's a separate mitzvah. There are two mitzvahs for love of a Ger Tzedek. One, you love a Ger Tzedek because you love every Jew. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. That's why it's hard to understand. Why is there a mitzvah in the Torah? V'ahavta misager. He says, V'ahavta misager is an entirely extra mitzvah on top of that. Because of what this Ger Tzedek went through in their journey and coming tachas kanfei hashchina, an extra thing. But the Shivcha Kanani is a person who say, listen, it really wasn't her choice, right? She was captured, she was purchased, right? She was given. And she, as strange as it seems, as much as we're careful with the Ger Tzedek, that they really have to be sincere and know what they're getting into and make their decision, this is an entirely different pathway into the Jewish people. Here, she doesn't really have any say in the matter, right? She's there and she's chayv in some mitzvahs, and there are things that she can't do just because of who she is. So that might be the first person we write off. The first person we say, okay, she's not really one of us. Okay, Amalek grabbed her, Baruch Hashem, nobody else, right? We're doing okay. To go into war, it was a dangerous war, right? You saw that it was there, and it had to go. So this again shows us this idea of the care for each and every person. So if we put the different pieces together, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed tremendous love to Am Yisrael at Yam Suf. And that love is something that comes even above and beyond, especially according to that Orach L'chaim. It's something that Am Yisrael may have had their doubts about during the whole process in Mitzrayim, right? And oftentimes it's hard for a Jew of any type to believe this idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves them. It says in the Navi straight out, Ahavti eschem num Hashem, but it's something which is very hard to believe in. And we come up with many, many reasons, not hard to find why Hashem shouldn't love us. But the images that are given to us in Tanakh, that of parent and child, are that of a love which is supposed to be there just because, not dependent on the behavior even. And that's why Am Yisrael's beginning was to come when they were at the next to 0 point in Ruchnius. Mem tes Shari Tuma. That's our beginning. That's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu took it out and did all these things for us. So therefore, anyone, and especially us, during those times when we feel that we don't deserve, we shouldn't deserve, we have to realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, but that comes with an obligation to look and to not forget and to love even the people who are emotionally disturbed and afraid, even the people who are cynical, even the people who are nudnikim, right? Even the people who are scoffing and making fun. Somehow you have to care about them, you have to see and think, how can this be shared with them in whatever way or another? And that care itself is what you have to take along with it to Matan Torah and to Ki Ish Echad B'Lev Echad. Okay.